The 106th Junkyard Devil's Guide to Destroying Communists and Spreading Managed Democracy. Chapter 0. Terminology. Disclaimer: the terminology used in this video is not common terminology used in game. This was made up entirely for this guide. Don't go into a match and scream about some Class 3 automaton. Also, this guide is based on the Super Helldive difficulty and the idea that you're using the Liberator or a similar weapon. For this video, a Class 1 automaton is an automaton of human-sized build with minimal armor. A Class 2 automaton is an enemy such as a Devastator or a Berserker, enemies with larger builds and armor, covering most of the target with notable weak spots. Class 3 automaton is a target that cannot be damaged by small arms fire for the most part. Think of a Hulk. A critical weak spot is the weak spot we recommend you aim for. A weak spot is just a weak spot that either does more damage or is able to be penetrated by light armor penetration. And an anti-tank weak spot is the specific location you should aim with anti-tank weaponry. Threat level is an indicator to how fast you kill it and how fast it kills you. And with all that being said, let's get into the video. Our first Class 1 automaton is the simple Trooper. The Trooper has a gun. Its weak spot is the head, but you don't really need to shoot at the weak spot. You can just shoot them, with your gun. Troopers do very little damage, they are not very accurate, and the only purpose they serve is fodder. Troopers just suck. Our second Class 1 automaton is the Rocket Trooper. This is the Trooper, but with a rocket launcher. Now, this thing sounds terrifying, but the Rocket Trooper is the biggest joke in the entire game. They would be extremely dangerous, but saying they have Stormtrooper aim is an understatement. I have played Helldivers for 200 hours. I have dismantled 18,000 communist invaders. I don't think I've actually seen a Rocket Trooper hit a single direct shot. Just shoot them. They won't shoot you. Even if you run out of all munitions, you can literally walk up to them and punch them in the face. These are not a threat. Next, let's look at the Brawler. These are troopers, but instead of guns, they have two knife hands. They will run right at you and try to stab you. As far as danger goes, these things are easy. You can even beat them in hand-to-hand combat by spamming F if you don't want to shoot them. Just like nearly all the Class 1 automatons, Brawlers hold little to no threat to any SEAF personnel. The first real threat on our list, the Commissar, is what happens when you mix a Trooper and a Brawler. They serve about as much purpose as that description would have you believe, except for the fact that they can shoot out a red flare. This is a bot drop flare, and they are a serious threat. When you see this flare go up, you need to run immediately. If you can't, because it's a critical objective, or God forbid, you're cornered, then this is a serious fight that you need to prepare for. Consider throwing out a barrage. Other than their ability to call in bot drops, Commissars don't really matter. Still, maybe shoot them first if they're in a patrol, but as far as threats go, this is barely one of them. The Marauder is just a trooper putting in 150%. It's a trooper, but it has slightly more health and, for the first time for Class 1s, actually threatens Helldivers with their damage. The only real difference is that they shoot in pretty long bursts. This does lead to higher damage, making this kind of a threat, especially in large numbers. But at the end of the day, just shoot them. Shoot them. Shoot them with a gun. Sure, it's better than a trooper, but that's not saying much. Chapter 2, Class 2 Automatons. The first automaton we'll go over in Chapter 2 is the Berserker. The Berserker is an automaton that is entirely restricted to melee combat. Its most notable weak spot is its red glowing skull and the abdomen. The most effective strategy is to maintain a medium distance from the Berserker while firing into its weak spot, specifically its balls. I'm not kidding, shoot it in the balls. Berserkers are very light, meaning that damage from the AR will bounce them around. Specifically, if you hit them in the head, their head will stagger backwards, setting your aim away from the skull weak point, making it nearly impossible to consistently hit the skull. And while you can shoot them anywhere, because they only have light armor covering their bodies, you should try to shoot them in their midsection because it does more damage. Oh, and by the way, quick tip, they can't drop down. If you have low ground, like if you're at the bottom of a cliff or something, they can't just jump down. They have to find some way of walking towards you. That can be useful, and consider that tip, that nugget of information, to be your reward for making it this far into the video. Most people click off after 30 seconds. The Devastator is an automaton best suited for medium-range combat. That being said, it's not very good at its job. It has a cannon attached to its hand as its main combat weapon. It has two notable weak points. The most notable of this is the red skull in the same location as almost all Class 2 automatons. This time, we actually recommend you target that skull because the Devastator doesn't bounce around as much as the Berserker does, and so it's much easier to hit, so the damage is actually worth it. It also has a weak point in the pelvis, which is less potent than the prior mentioned skull weak point, so we don't recommend you aim for it. But you should maybe aim for it at longer ranges where hitting the skull is difficult. The Devastator doesn't have that much damage, it can't aim very well, and can die very quickly if you're targeting the correct weak points. It's honestly kind of a lame automaton and is often overestimated by newer players. The Rocket Devastator is a Devastator with one major difference. It has a rocket launcher on its shoulders. The Rocket Devastator is a danger to SEAF personnel, make no mistake, but a lot of people overestimate them. The rockets are, in of themselves, a weak point that can be damaged, and you can even destroy the rocket launchers through firepower alone. This is usually an inferior option to firing upon the skull weak point, because crippling an automaton is always a worse option than killing an automaton. However, at longer ranges, it can be nearly impossible to hit the small skull, so targeting the middle weak spot could be more valuable at longer ranges. While the many rockets pose a severe threat to SEAF personnel, they travel slowly enough to dive out of the way. Essentially, be aware of the rockets and target the skull at close ranges and the pelvis at longer ranges. As far as Class 2 automatons go, you're going to notice a theme here. The Heavy Devastator is an extreme threat to any SEAF personnel within its surprisingly long range. It replaces the smaller arm cannons with a large machine gun, firing public health care and other despicable socialist policies at incredibly high fire rates. It also holds a large shield protecting most of its front-facing body. It has the Telltale Skull weak point that is extremely common among Class 2 automatons. This is the recommended weak point because the Heavy Devastator blocks its midsection with its shield. The shield is nearly impenetrable and should not be shot at. The only reliable way to truly destroy Heavy Devastator is to shoot the skull weak point. However, this is extremely difficult with most weapons at longer ranges, requiring close quarters combat, which is the exact range the Heavy Devastator is most effective. One good piece of advice is to never be below them, because when you have the low ground, the shield blocks the skull. This is a difficult matchup, but often you can kill it before it even initiates a burst, or shoot it between bursts while you're behind cover. I'm about to give you the most common, simplest, most annoying, yet surprisingly useful advice ever. For all Class 2 automatons, just shoot them in the head. Anyways, when engaging out larger quantities or when other Class 2 automatons accompany it, it may be worth it to use some simple stratagems like an eagle strafing run to take care of this. Please note, don't use stratagem weapons like autocannons on the shield, it does nothing. The Reinforced Scout Strider. It's the only one we're covering because the regular one doesn't appear on Super Hell Dive. This thing. This fucking thing. This is the most annoying, communist, clinking, clanking, clattering collection of Caligulous junk ever to be created. They have one weak spot. One. It's small. It's a little small. I hate it! You need to shoot them in the missiles. They shoot poorly, the rockets don't do that much damage, and the Reinforced Scout Strider isn't that threatening. But you may ask, what happens when it shoots off all of its rockets? What are the other weak spots? Where do we shoot it when it has no more missiles? Can we damage it if that happens? No! Just shoot them in the rockets before that happens. Anyways, Chapter 3, Class 3 Automatons. The Hulk Bruiser is the Rocket Devastator at the end of its training montage. Basically, it's a metal hunk of junk, invincible from the front with light AP, and it has a burst fire rocket launcher. It's a fairly big battlefield presence and will usually require some kind of anti-tank weaponry. You can use a Senator or a heavy machine gun, but usually you'd use a recoilless rifle or a Quasar. In essence, you can dodge the rockets and return heavy fire to deal with this thing. There's also the Hulk Scorcher. The only difference between Hulks is that this one specializes in close quarters combat. It has a melee weapon and a short range flamethrower. Essentially, just take the last sentence of the Hulk Bruiser section and replace dodge rockets with stay more than 10 meters away, and you've got this. The first tank here is the Barrager tank. This thing, I'm not sure if it's bugged or something, but I'm not actually sure it does anything. It has light armor everywhere, so you can actually just shoot the tank with a pistol like Saving Private Ryan. Right, they shoot rockets, but into the sky like a mortar. So it has a few decades of fire delay before the rockets actually hit anything. It's just kind of lame. Not to be a bot sympathizer, but I genuinely feel bad for these guys. It's like watching a toddler trying to rock climb, except it's not funny. This thing is just sad. Just genuinely sad. Alright, here we've got the Shredder tank. Now this thing is an actual threat. It's a machine gun on wheels. It has really high damage and should be stayed far away from. Listen, okay. This is a hard truth right here. It's controversial. The CIA might silence me for this. YouTube may demonetize me for this, and you may not believe me. They'll say I'm wrong, that I'm spreading misinformation. This is dangerous, and that I'm wrong. But this is true, okay? And it's an important truth. Anti-tank weaponry is good at killing tanks. So, you can use it to kill these kinds of tanks. But don't shoot on the angled sides, because the rockets will actually bounce off. Shoot it right in the barrel to ensure a kill. This thing is dangerous, but you can make it. After all, you're a Helldiver. Annihilator tanks. A cannon turret and a shredder tank on treads. Its weaponry is something resembling a cannon turret with a shredder tank style machine gun. Wow, it's like I just said this. Anyways, they give a small signal before they fire the heavy gun, so dive at the right time to stay alive and dodge the giant laser. As for the machine gun, it's actually pretty short range, so you can just stay at a medium distance. As for weak spots, like all tanks, you should ideally be hitting them in the barrel. There's also a back weak spot that you can shoot at if you have heavy armor penetration, but as far as the Annihilator goes, this is seriously dangerous. Use caution when approaching, and hopefully try to kill them before they can start firing the machine gun and heavy cannon. This is a real anti-tank check on the bot front, which means it's a test to see whether or not you can use your anti-tank. And ideally, you should shoot them in the barrel. Sure hope you have a commando. A rarer occurrence, when not plagued by a certain black box, gunships are flying death machines of terror and socialism. Their extreme mobility and high altitude combat style makes them virtually immune to red stratagems. Instead, they practically necessitate the use of anti-tank weaponry. However, if one can properly aim, you don't need to hit them in a specific location to down them. Just fire away with any of your stratagem weapons. Be mindful, however, of the gunship's machine gun and missile launches. I feel like a broken record saying this, but it's not a super accurate shooter, so you can more or less live with them for a limited amount of time. Gunships also come in 2s and 3s. In short, target gunships with stratagem weapons, but not stratagems, and stay mobile in between your shots. We made a video on killing this thing. Go watch it. Aside from that, this is a pretty big threat with heavy damage and incredible resilience. Alright, that's all of them. Press all the funny buttons, or just one if you like. If you refuse to press the buttons, all you really need to do is watch more of our videos to support us. And you can also join our platoon's Discord to help fight back against the Communist Scourge.